They looked at his worn coat and saw a beggar. They looked at his silence and saw weakness. But when the most powerful CEO in New York tried to throw the old man out of the restaurant, he didn't realize he was shouting at the owner of the very ground he stood on. Everyone in the room laughed at the silent stranger, until the invisible waitress stepped forward and whispered 3 words in a language no one else understood. Those 3 words didn't just silence the room, they brought an empire crashing down. What happens when the person you treat like dirt holds the keys to your destruction? You're about to find out. The Obsidian Room wasn't just a restaurant, it was a theater of war where New York's elite battled for status using black credit cards and vintage wines as ammunition. Located on the 45th floor of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park, the walls were lined with dark mahogany and the air smelled of truffle oil and old money. For Sophia Jenkins, it was just a battlefield where she tried not to get shot. Sophia adjusted her apron, her hands trembling slightly. She was 24, with tired eyes that hinted at a life much harder than her age suggested. She had been a doctoral candidate in linguistics at Columbia University, a prodigy who could distinguish between 17 dialects of French before she turned 20. But intellect didn't pay for chemotherapy. When her father, a retired steel worker, was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma, the tuition money vanished, replaced by hospital bills that piled up like snowdrifts. Now, the genius linguist was wiping crumbs off tablecloths for minimum wage plus tips. "Sophia, table 4 needs a refill on the Dom Perignon. Move it," hissed her manager, Charles Henderson. Henderson was a man who sweated anxiety. He wore a suit that was too tight and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was terrified of the clientele, particularly the man currently holding court at the center table, Matteo Vane. Matteo Vane was the 35-year-old CEO of Vane Capital. He was handsome in a predatory way, wearing a bespoke Brioni suit that cost more than Sophia's father had made in 3 years. He was currently loud, drunk on his own importance, and surrounded by a sycophantic group of junior investors who laughed every time he exhaled. "So I told the senator," Vane boomed, his voice cutting through the hushed atmosphere. "If you want the funding for the harbor project, you kiss the ring. And guess what? He asked which hand." The table erupted in laughter. Sophia approached silently to refill the ice bucket. Vane didn't look at her. To him, she was furniture. He waved a hand dismissively, nearly knocking the bottle from her grasp. "Careful, sweetie," Vane sneered, not breaking eye contact with his associates. "That bottle is worth more than your life." Sophia bit her tongue, a metallic taste filling her mouth. "Apologies, Mr. Vane," she murmured, retreating into the shadows. It was 8:45 p.m. when the atmosphere in the Obsidian Room shifted. The elevator doors, usually reserved for guests who had reservations booked 6 months in advance, slid open. The room went quiet, but not out of respect. It was out of confusion. An old man stepped out. He looked like a spectre from a different world. He wore a heavy, charcoal wool coat that had clearly seen better decades. The elbows were patched, and the hem was frayed. He leaned heavily on a cane made of dark, unpolished wood. His face was a map of deep wrinkles, hidden partially by a grey beard, but his eyes were startling, bright, piercing blue, like chips of ice. He walked with a slow, painful limp. Henderson, the manager, looked as if he was about to have a stroke. He practically sprinted across the dining room to intercept the man before he could reach the dining area. "Sir! Sir!" Henderson whispered frantically, blocking the old man's path. "I think you're in the wrong place. The service entrance is in the alley. We don't give handouts here." The old man didn't blink. He didn't even look at Henderson. He simply looked past him, toward a small, empty table near the window. Table 9. It was permanently reserved, though in Sophia's 2 years of working there, she had never seen anyone sit at it. The old man moved to step around Henderson. "Now, listen here," Henderson said, his voice rising, drawing the attention of the diners. "You cannot be in here. This is a private establishment. You are disturbing the guests." At table 4, Matteo Vane turned around, a cruel grin spreading across his face. He loved a spectacle, especially when it involved someone beneath him. "Let him in, Henderson," Vane shouted. "Maybe he wants to apply for your job. He's certainly dressed better than you." Vane's table roared with laughter. Henderson flushed red, humiliated, which only made him angrier at the intruder. "Security," Henderson snapped into his headset. "I have a vagrant in the main dining hall." The old man finally stopped. He looked at Henderson, then at Vane. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. His jaw worked, his throat tightened, but there was only a raspy exhale. He tapped his throat with 2 fingers and shook his head. "Mute," Vane announced loudly. "Great. A homeless mute." "What is this? A charity ward? Get him out of here, Henderson, before I call the health inspector. I'm trying to eat a $300 steak." 2 large security guards emerged from the hallway. They weren't gentle men. They reached for the old man's arms. Sophia watched from the service station, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw something the others didn't. She saw the way the old man held the cane, not just for support, but like a weapon he knew how to use. She saw the fabric of his coat. It was old, yes, but it was vicuña wool, the most expensive fabric in the world, though worn down by time. And she saw his eyes. Those weren't the eyes of a beggar. Those were the eyes of a king in exile. Without thinking, Sophia dropped her tray on the service counter. The clang caused a few heads to turn. "Stop!" she called out, stepping onto the floor. Henderson spun around, his eyes bulging. "Sophia! Get back to your station." "He has a reservation," Sophia lied. Her voice shook, but she stood her ground. She walked past the stunned security guards and stood between them and the old man. "What are you talking about?" Henderson hissed. "He's a bum." "Table 9, Sophia said, improvising rapidly. "The notation in the system said, 'The silent guest.' I saw it this morning." There was no such notation, but Henderson was a coward who feared administrative errors more than anything. He hesitated. I didn't see that," Henderson stammered. "It was a priority override," Sophia said, channeling every ounce of confidence she had left from her days defending her thesis. She turned to the old man and offered a gentle smile. She gestured to table 9. The old man looked at her. For a second, the icy blue eyes softened. He gave a microscopic nod and walked past the stunned guards, sitting down at the best table in the house. The room was dead silent. Matteo Vane looked furious. His entertainment had been spoiled by a waitress. "You've got to be kidding me," Vane spat, standing up. "Henderson, are you going to let this waitress run your floor? That man smells like a wet dog. If he stays, I go. And if I go, Vane Capital's corporate account goes with me." The ultimatum hung in the air. Vane Capital spent nearly $500,000 a year at the Obsidian Room. Sophia's job and her father's medicine hung in the balance. The silence in the restaurant was suffocating. Every diner had stopped eating, their forks hovering halfway to their mouths. The tension was so thick it felt physical. Henderson looked from Matteo Vane to Sophia, and then to the silent old man sitting with perfect posture at table 9. The math in Henderson's head was simple. Vane was money. The old man was a liability. Sophia was expendable. "Sophia," Henderson said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low pitch. "You are making a mistake. Get him out or you're fired. Right now." Sophia looked at the old man. He had placed his hands on the table. They were trembling, not from fear, but perhaps from age or a neurological condition. He looked lonely, deeply, profoundly lonely. "I can't do that, sir," Sophia whispered. "Then you're fired," Henderson barked. "Security, remove the man, and escort her out, too." "Wait," Matteo Vane interrupted. He walked over to table 9, holding his wine glass. He loomed over the sitting old man. "I want to have some fun first." Vane slammed his hand down on the table, making the silverware jump. The old man didn't flinch. "Hey, Grandpa," Vane sneered. "Can you hear me, or are you deaf too?" The old man looked up at Vane. His expression was unreadable, a stone mask. "I bet he doesn't even have a dime," Vane laughed, looking back at his table of sycophants. "Here." Vane reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He crumbled it into a ball and threw it at the old man. It bounced off the man's chest and landed in his lap. "Take it. Go buy some soup. Get out of my restaurant," Vane said. The old man slowly picked up the bill. He smoothed it out on the table with deliberate, slow movements. Then he reached into the inner pocket of his worn coat. Everyone watched. Was he pulling out a weapon? He pulled out a pen, an old silver fountain pen. He wrote something on the bill, then pushed it toward the edge of the table, offering it back to Vane. Vane snatched it up and read it. "Not enough," Vane read aloud. He threw his head back and laughed. "The beggar has pride. He says 100 isn't enough." Vane turned to Sophia. "You want to play hero, sweetheart? Fine. Since you know he has a reservation, take his order. But if he can't pay the bill at the end of the night, I'm going to have the police arrest both of you for theft of services. Deal?" Henderson nodded eagerly. "That's fair. Very fair, Mr. Vane." Sophia knew it was a trap. The cheapest item on the menu was $40, but she couldn't back down now. She nodded. "Deal." She walked to the table. "Sir," she said softly, "may I get you something?" The old man looked at her. He tapped the menu but didn't open it. He pointed to his chest, then made a gesture with his hand, a flat palm moving away from his mouth. He was trying to communicate, but it wasn't American Sign Language. Sophia recognized the frustration in his eyes. He wanted something specific, but he physically couldn't speak English, or perhaps speak at all. He reached for the napkin and the pen again. He wrote a single word in shaky block letters, Ardia. Sophia stared at the word, Ardia. Vane was looking over her shoulder. Ardia? What is that? A brand of cat food. He's senile. But Sophia's mind was racing. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a linguist. Ardia. It wasn't Spanish. It wasn't Italian. It looked like a root word. The old man looked at her, his eyes desperate. He tapped the word again. Then he wrote another word below it. Belza. Belza. A shockwave went through Sophia's brain. She remembered a semester studying language isolates, languages that have no relationship to any other language in the world. Ardia meant sheep in a specific dialect. Belza meant black. Ardi Belza, the black sheep. But it was the language that mattered. It was Euskara, Basque, but not modern Basque. It was an archaic dialect, something spoken in the high Pyrenees mountains, rarely heard outside of very specific, very old families in the Navarre region. Why was a homeless man in New York writing in archaic Basque? The old man looked at her, waiting for rejection, waiting for the confusion. Sophia took a deep breath. She leaned in close, ignoring Vane's mocking laughter. She looked the old man in the eyes and spoke. She didn't speak English. She didn't speak French. Nahi al duzu ardo belza eta bildotza? She asked softly. Do you want red wine and the lamb? The reaction was instantaneous. The old man's eyes went wide. His mask of stone shattered. His mouth fell open, and a gasp escaped his throat. He looked at her as if she were an angel descending from the heavens. He reached out and grabbed her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. He nodded vigorously, tears welling in his eyes. "Bye," he rasped, a sound finally breaking through. "Bye, Mercedes." "Yes, please." Sophia straightened up, a newfound strength coursing through her. She turned to Henderson and Vane. The room had gone quiet again, confused by the strange guttural language she had just spoken. "He will have the vintage Cabernet," Sophia said clearly, "and the rack of lamb." "Rare." Vane looked confused, his brow furrowing. What was that? What kind of gibberish was that? "It's his native tongue," Sophia said coldly. "Something I doubt you'd understand, Mr. Vane. It requires a bit of culture." Vane's face turned purple. "You little—" "I'm taking his order," Sophia said, cutting him off. "As per our deal." She walked to the kitchen, leaving Vane fuming. But as she punched in the order, her hands were shaking. She had bought them time, but the bill for that wine and lamb would be over $400. She checked her bank account on her phone. She had $42. She prayed that the old man had hidden millions in that coat. Because if he hadn't, she was going to jail, and her father was going to die alone. Back in the dining room, Vane wasn't done. He pulled out his phone. "Get me the police," he said loud enough for the old man to hear. "I want a patrol car waiting outside in 30 minutes. We're going to have a show." The old man watched Vane make the call. He didn't look worried. He took a sip of the water Sophia had poured. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, heavy object. He placed it on the table. It was an old, rusted iron key. He looked at Vane, then at the key, and for the first time, the old man smiled. It was a terrifying smile. The kitchen was a chaotic symphony of shouting chefs and clattering pans, but Sophia moved through it like a ghost. Her hands were still trembling as she placed the order for the rack of lamb and the vintage Cabernet. "Table 9. The sous chef, a burly man named Marco, scoffed, looking at the ticket. "The hobo table. Sophia, Henderson is going to deduct this from your paycheck. You know that, right? That bottle alone is $400. "Just make it, Marco," Sophia said, her voice tight. "Please, make it perfect." Marco looked at her, seeing the desperation in her eyes. He softened. "All right, kid. But if the cops come, I don't know you." Back in the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted from awkward silence to a spectator sport. Matteo Vane had turned his chair completely around to face table 9, treating the old man's dinner like a zoo exhibit. "Look at him," Vane announced to his table, swirling his brandy. "He's sitting there like he owns the place. It's pathetic. It's a delusion of grandeur brought on by dementia." The old man, however, seemed to have entered a meditative state. He sat with his hands folded over the head of his cane, his eyes fixed on the view of Central Park outside the window. He ignored Vane completely. When Sophia returned with the wine, a 2012 Silver Oak, she performed the pouring ritual with the precision of a surgeon. She presented the cork. The old man waved it away and simply nodded for her to pour. As the crimson liquid filled the glass, the old man looked up at Sophia. His lips moved silently. Sophia leaned in, blocking Vane's view with her body. "Zagatic?" he whispered. Why? It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of the world. Why was she risking her job, her reputation, and her freedom for a stranger who looked like he had slept in a dumpster? Sophia replied in the same, hushed, archaic dialect, the words feeling strange but right on her tongue. "Nire aitak begi berdinak ditu. Eta berak ere, Inork es du entzuten. My father has the same eyes, and like you, no one listens to him. The old man's expression crumbled for a fraction of a second. A deep, profound sadness washed over his face, followed by a flash of intense gratitude. He reached out and touched Sophia's hand, just a fleeting tap of his cold fingers against hers. Eskerrik asko, Umea, he breathed. Thank you, child. Stop whispering, Vane shouted, slamming his hand on his table. Speak English. This is America. I bet they're plotting to steal the silverware, Henderson. Henderson rushed over, sweating profusely. Sophia, step away from the guest. You are to provide service, not fraternize, and speak English, or you're out. I am merely explaining the notes of the wine, sir. Sophia lied smoothly, turning to face them with a mask of calm she didn't feel. He had a question about the vintage. He doesn't even know what year it is, let alone the vintage. Vane spat. He grabbed a bread roll from his basket and tossed it toward table 9. The roll hit the old man's shoulder and fell to the floor. The room gasped. This was too far. Even Vane's sycophants looked uncomfortable. The old man didn't move. He didn't look at the roll. He didn't look at Vane. He simply picked up his wine glass, swirled it gently, and took a sip. He closed his eyes, savoring the taste, completely denying Vane the reaction he so desperately wanted. You deaf old bat! Vane stood up, his face flushing red with alcohol and rage. I am Matteo Vane. I am worth $200 million. Look at me when I assault you. Mr. Vane, please, Henderson pleaded, though he was clearly more afraid of losing Vane's business than he was concerned for the old man's dignity. Just then, the food arrived. Marco, the sous chef, had outdone himself. The lamb was seared to perfection, crusted with herbs, sitting on a bed of truffle risotto. The smell wafted through the room, silencing even Vane for a moment. Sophia placed the plate down. Bon appétit, she whispered. The old man picked up his knife and fork. His hands, which had been shaking earlier, were suddenly steady. He cut a piece of meat with an elegance that betrayed high breeding. He took a bite, and then he began to weep. It wasn't a loud sob. It was a silent stream of tears tracking through the dirt and wrinkles of his face. He ate slowly, savoring every bite, crying the entire time. Oh, look, Vane mocked, pulling out his phone to record a video. He's crying because it's the first time he's eaten real food in his life. Wave for the camera, Grandpa. You're going to be a viral star on TikTok. The crying hobo. Sophia felt a rage so hot it nearly blinded her. She gripped the water pitcher so hard her knuckles turned white. She wanted to smash it over Vane's head, but she knew that would only seal her fate, and her father's. She looked at the old man. He wasn't crying because of hunger. She knew that look. He was crying because of memory. The taste of that lamb meant something to him. It was a ghost from a past life. The old man finished his meal. He wiped his mouth with the linen napkin, folding it neatly on the table. He looked at Sophia and nodded. It was time. Bring the check, Vane called out gleefully, and tell the police to pull up to the front door. The show is about to end. Henderson printed the bill. He held it in his hands, his fingers twitching. He looked at Vane, then at the bill, then back at Vane. Vane winked. Did you add the service fees we discussed? Henderson swallowed hard. Yes, Mr. Vane. Special consultation fees and the private room surcharge for disturbing the peace. Good, Vane grinned. Let's see the beggar pay for that. Sophia took the leather folder from Henderson. She opened it to check the total before presenting it. Her breath hitched. She nearly dropped the folder. 13 house also 150 how? This isn't right, Sophia stammered, looking at Henderson. He had a rack of lamb and 1 glass of wine. That's $80, maybe $100 with the open bottle. We charged him for the full bottle, Henderson said, his voice nasally and defensive. And Mr. Vane's table, well, Mr. Vane decided to comp his table's drinks to this gentleman's tab, as a learning experience for the vagrant. It's a valid transaction. That is fraud, Sophia hissed. You can't make him pay for Vane's drinks. I can do whatever I want, Vane said, looming over her. I'm the customer. He's the nuisance. If he can't pay, it's theft of services. The amount doesn't matter. $1 or 10,000, the handcuffs are the same. Present the bill, waitress. Sophia walked to table 9. Her legs felt like lead. She placed the leather folder on the table. I'm so sorry, she whispered in English, forgetting the Basque in her panic. They rigged it. It's a trap. The old man looked at her kindly. He opened the folder. He looked at the number. 13,450. $. He didn't blink. He didn't gasp. He merely reached into his coat pocket. Vane and his associates leaned in, eager to see the humiliation. Here it comes. Vane laughed. Is he going to pull out lint? A dead rat? Maybe some buttons? The old man pulled out his hand. It was empty. He patted his other pockets. Empty. He looked up at Sophia and gave a small, sad shrug. He's broke, Vane roared, clapping his hands. I knew it! Henderson, get the cops in here, now! 2 uniformed police officers, who had been waiting in the lobby at Vane's request, pushed through the double doors. They looked serious, hands resting on their belts. What's the problem here? The older officer asked. Theft, Vane announced, pointing a manicured finger at the old man. This man ate a 5-star meal and has no means to pay. The bill is 13 grand. Arrest him. The officer looked at the old man. Sir, can you pay this bill? The old man remained silent. He's a mute, Henderson added quickly, and a vagrant. He's been harassing the customers. Sir, the officer said, stepping closer to table 9. I need you to stand up. You're coming with us. Sophia stepped in front of the officer. Wait, please. The bill is fake. They added thousands of dollars of their own drinks to it. He only had dinner. Step aside, ma'am, or you'll be arrested for obstruction, the officer warned. The old man slowly stood up. He was tall, surprisingly so. Even with his stoop, he looked the officer in the eye. He reached into his pocket one last time. Careful, he might have a knife, Vane shouted, hiding behind a waiter. The old man pulled out the object he had shown Sophia earlier, the rusted iron key. He held it out to the officer with a steady hand. The officer looked at the key, confused. What is this? Sir, that's not money. Vane laughed hysterically. He's trying to pay with scrap metal. Oh, this is rich. Maybe it opens his cardboard box under the bridge. The old man withdrew the key. He looked at the table. He picked up the pen again. He wrote on the back of the receipt. He handed the receipt to Sophia. Sophia looked at the shaky handwriting. Give the key to Pierre. Pierre? Sophia frowned. Who is Pierre? The chef, Henderson snapped. Head chef Pierre Lefebvre. Why would he want your trash? The old man pointed to the kitchen doors. His eyes were intense, commanding. I'm done with this, the officer said, grabbing the old man's arm. Let's go. No, Sophia shouted. She grabbed the key from the old man's hand and sprinted toward the kitchen. Sophia, come back here, Henderson screamed. Sophia burst through the swinging doors into the heat of the kitchen. Chef! Chef Pierre! Pierre Lefebvre, a temperamental Frenchman with 3 Michelin stars to his name, looked up from a sauce reduction. He was a terrifying man, known for throwing plates when angry. What is it? Pierre roared. I am busy. A customer, Sophia panted, holding up the rusted key. He said to give this to you. Pierre wiped his hands on his apron, scowling. I do not have time for games, Sophia. "Who is the customer?" "An old man. Silent. He spoke Basque. He ate the lamb." Pierre froze. The color drained from his face. The spoon he was holding clattered onto the stovetop. "Basque?" Pierre whispered. He walked over to Sophia, his eyes wide. He looked at the key in her hand. It was a large skeleton key, the head shaped like a wolf. Pierre gasped. He snatched the key from her hand, staring at it as if it were a holy relic. "Where is he?" Pierre demanded, his voice shaking. "Where is he?" "Dining room. The police are arresting him." "Arresting him?" Pierre's face turned from pale to a deep, violent shade of red. He didn't just walk. He stormed toward the doors. "Get out of my way." Back in the dining room, the officer had handcuffed the old man. Vane was filming it all on his phone, narrating the scene. Justice served at the Obsidian Room, keeping the trash off the streets. The kitchen doors flew open with a bang that shook the walls. "Unhand him!" The voice boomed like thunder. Chef Pierre marched into the dining room, still wearing his stained apron. He looked like a madman. Henderson ran over. "Pierre, get back in the kitchen! This is a police matter!" Pierre shoved Henderson aside with one arm, sending the manager stumbling into a table. Pierre marched straight up to the police officer and the handcuffed old man. "Take those cuffs off," Pierre growled. "Immediately." "Excuse me?" the officer said, taken aback. "Who are you?" "I am the man who cooks the food you are not worthy to eat." Pierre spat. He turned to the old man. Pierre's arrogance vanished instantly. He bowed, deeply, lower than a bow to a customer. It was a bow to a sovereign. "Monsieur," Pierre said, his voice trembling with emotion, "I didn't know. I thought you were dead." The room went deadly silent. Matteo Vane lowered his phone. "You know this hobo, Pierre?" Vane asked, confused. Pierre slowly turned to face Vane. The look of contempt on the chef's face was withering. "Hobo?" Pierre repeated softly. He held up the rusted key for everyone to see. "This key does not open a box," Pierre announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "This key opens the wine cellar, but not the one you know. It opens the private vault beneath the foundation. A vault that was sealed 30 years ago." Pierre turned to the police officer. "You are arresting the wrong man. You are arresting Elias Blackwood." A murmur ran through the room. The name sounded familiar, like a myth from a history book. "Blackwood?" Vane laughed nervously. "Blackwood died in the 90s. He was the recluse billionaire who built half the city. This guy is just a look-alike." Pierre ignored Vane. He looked at the old man. "Sir, the lamb. Was it correct?" The old man, Elias Blackwood, looked at Pierre. He nodded slowly. Then he looked at his cuffed hands. Pierre turned to the officer. "Take them off. Now, or I swear on my life, you will be a crossing guard by tomorrow morning." The officer hesitated, looking at the key, then at the old man's commanding presence. He unclicked the cuffs. Elias rubbed his wrists. He reached for the pen and paper again. He wrote something and handed it to Pierre. Pierre read it, and his eyes went wide. He looked at Matteo Vane. Then he looked at Henderson. And finally, he looked at Sophia. "What does it say?" Vane demanded. "Does it say he's sorry?" Pierre looked up, a dark smile forming on his face. "No," Pierre said. "It says, I would like to buy the building." Vane snorted. "With what money? He couldn't pay for dinner." Pierre flipped the paper over. On the back, written in that shaky hand, was a series of numbers. "He doesn't need money," Pierre said. "He is calling a board meeting right now." Suddenly, the elevator doors chimed, but it wasn't a guest. 3 men in dark suits stepped out. They moved with military precision. The man in the lead wasn't police. He was wearing a lapel pin that Sophia recognized from the news. It was the governor of New York, and he was looking straight at the old man with a look of absolute terror. terror. Governor Richard Harrison was a man known for his composure. He had weathered political scandals, transit strikes, and budget crises without breaking a sweat. But as he stood in the dining room of the Obsidian Room, staring at the old man in the charcoal coat, he looked like a child caught stealing candy. Matteo Vane, oblivious to the shift in atmospheric pressure, smoothed his suit jacket and stepped forward with a confident grin. He assumed the governor, whom he had donated heavily to during the last election, was there to restore order. "Richard, thank God!" Vane boomed, extending a hand. "You won't believe the incompetence here tonight. We have a vagrant refusing to leave, and the staff is protecting him. I need you to have your detail clear the room so we can finish our dinner." Governor Harrison didn't shake Vane's hand. He didn't even acknowledge Vane's existence. He walked straight past the billionaire CEO, his eyes locked on Elias Blackwood. The governor stopped 3 feet from table 9. He swallowed hard, adjusting his tie. "Mr. Blackwood," the governor said, his voice cracking slightly. The City Council, we received a notification from the Dormant Assets Division, a proximity alert. We didn't believe it was real." Elias Blackwood sat silently. He looked at the governor with the same impassive expression he had worn all night. He didn't rise. He didn't nod. He simply lifted a finger and pointed at Sophia. The governor looked confused. He turned to Sophia, the waitress standing in her cheap uniform, clutching a dirty rag. "Who is she?" Harrison asked. Elias tapped the table twice, a sharp, impatient sound. He picked up his pen and wrote on a fresh napkin. He slid it to Sophia. Sophia looked at the napkin. Her voice trembled as she read it aloud. "She is my voice. Speak to her. If you speak to me directly again, I will foreclose on the city's municipal bonds." The room collectively gasped. The threat was astronomical. Foreclosing on municipal bonds meant bankrupting the city of New York. I understand," the governor stammered, turning fully to Sophia. He treated her suddenly with the reverence of a diplomat. "Miss, please tell Mr. Blackwood that we are at his service. What does he require?" Matteo Vane could take it no longer. The humiliation was burning him alive. "This is insane!" Vane shouted, stepping between the governor and Sophia. "Richard, are you drunk? This is a homeless man. He can't foreclose on a hot dog stand. He has a $13,000 bill he can't pay. He is a criminal." Elias's eyes narrowed. He looked at Vane, then picked up the bill, the fraudulent invoice Henderson and Vane had concocted. He looked at the bottom line, 13,450. Wires. Elias pulled out a checkbook from his inner pocket. It wasn't a standard checkbook. It was bound in black leather with gold edges. The checks inside didn't have a bank logo. They just had a family crest, a wolf holding a key. He wrote out a check. He tore it off and handed it to Henderson, who was shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. "There," Vane sneered. "Let's see it bounce. I bet it's drawn on the bank of make-believe." Henderson looked at the check. His eyes bulged. It's for $15,000, Henderson squeaked. He added a tip. "It doesn't matter," Vane yelled. "It's paper. It's worthless." Elias tapped Sophia's arm. He handed her another note. Sophia read it, her confidence growing as she realized the titan she was standing beside. "The bill is paid. Now, we discuss the purchase." "Purchase of what?" the governor asked Sophia. Sophia read the next line. "The building. I built this tower in 1985. I leased the management rights to the Vane Family Trust in 1995. The lease expires tonight." Vane froze. His face went ashen. "That's a lie. My father built this tower." "Your father," the governor said quietly, finally looking at Vane with pity, "was a project manager. Elias Blackwood financed the entire skyline, Matteo. Everyone knows that. We just thought he died in the Alps 30 years ago." Elias wrote again. Sophia read the command. "I am revoking the management lease effective immediately. I am also exercising the bad actor clause in the contract due to the conduct of the current tenants." Elias pointed a long, bony finger at Matteo Vane. "Remove him from my property," Sophia read. "He is trespassing." Vane stumbled back. "You can't do that. I have a lease. I have rights. I'm Matteo Vane." Elias looked at the governor. He raised an eyebrow. It was a silent challenge. "Who really runs this city?" The governor didn't hesitate. He turned to the police officers who were still standing there, confused and holding their handcuffs. "Officers," the governor barked, "Mr. Vane is trespassing on private property. Remove him. If he resists, arrest him." "What?" Vane shrieked as the officers turned toward him. "You work for me. I pay your pension fund donations." "Actually," the governor muttered, looking at Elias, "I think Mr. Blackwood pays those." The officers grabbed Vane by the arms. The tables had turned so violently that Vane couldn't process the reality. He was being dragged out of the restaurant where he had been a king just 10 minutes ago. "No! Let go of me!" Vane screamed, kicking a chair over. "Henderson, do something!" Henderson was busy trying to make himself invisible against the wall. "Wait," Sophia said suddenly. The officers stopped. Vane looked at her, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Yes, tell them, Sophia. Tell them this is a mistake." Sophia looked down at Elias. Elias looked back at her, his blue eyes twinkling with a dark amusement. He nodded. Sophia turned to Vane. "Mr. Blackwood has one more thing to say before you go." The silence in the obsidian room was absolute. The diners, the staff, and the security team hung on every movement. Matteo Vane stood near the exit, held firmly by 2 police officers, his expensive suit rumpled, his face a mask of sweaty desperation. Elias Blackwood didn't write this time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. It was an ancient flip phone, a relic from another era. He dialed a number and put it on speaker, placing it on the table near the microphone of the governor's security detail, which amplified the sound. The line rang once. "Vane Capital, Chairman's office." A crisp female voice answered. It was Vane's own executive assistant. Elias tapped the phone but said nothing. He slid the phone toward Sophia. Sophia understood. She picked up the device. "Hello?" Sophia said. I am calling on behalf of Elias Blackwood." There was a pause on the other end. A long, terrified pause. Then the sound of a chair scraping and a phone being fumbled. "Mr. Blackwood?" A new voice came on the line. It was an older man. Vane recognized the voice instantly. It was his father, the chairman emeritus of the board. "Dad!" Vane shouted from the door. "Dad, tell these idiots who I am." "Shut up, Matteo!" His father's voice roared through the speaker. "Is Mr. Blackwood there? Is he listening?" Sophia looked at Elias. He nodded. "Yes, he is listening," she said. "Please," Vane's father pleaded, his voice shaking. "We received the transfer notification, the liquidity call. Mr. Blackwood, if you pull your assets from the harboring fund, Vane Capital is insolvent. We will be bankrupt by morning. Please don't do this." Vane's jaw dropped. The harbor project he had bragged about, the massive deal that made him a god in the industry, was funded by Blackwood's money. He had been swimming in a pool, never realizing the water belonged to the shark. Elias took the pen. He wrote 2 words on the napkin. Sophia read them into the phone. "Hard karma." Elias cut the connection. "Dad! Dad!" Vane screamed at the dead line. The governor looked at Vane. "It sounds like you're no longer a billionaire, Matteo. which means you can't afford the lawyers you're going to need. Get him out, the governor signaled. As the officers dragged Vane through the double doors, he wasn't shouting anymore. He was sobbing. The King of New York had been reduced to a weeping child, destroyed by 3 words of a language he didn't respect, and a man he deemed worthless. Once the doors swung shut, the energy in the room shifted. The danger was gone, replaced by a deep, reverent awe. Elias Blackwood sighed. It was a heavy, tired sound. He looked at his plate of lamb, now cold. He pushed it away. He turned his attention to Henderson. The manager was trembling so violently his teeth were chattering. He had tried to sneak away during the commotion, but Chef Pierre was blocking the kitchen exit, arms crossed, looking like an executioner. Mr. Blackwood, Henderson stammered. I was only following protocol. I was trying to protect the establishment. Elias stared at him. He didn't write a note. He simply looked at the governor. Health Inspector, the governor said, understanding the silent command immediately. Tax audit. Labor Board investigation. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Henderson collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. His career was over. He wouldn't just be fired, he would be legally dismantled. Finally, Elias turned to Sophia. The room watched. What would happen to the waitress? Elias looked her up and down. He noted her frayed apron, her tired shoes, the intelligence in her eyes that had been stifled by a world that only saw her uniform. He picked up the silver fountain pen one last time. He opened the leather checkbook. He wrote a check. He tore it out and placed it on the table. Then he wrote a note on the napkin. Sophia hesitated. She didn't want his money. She had done it because it was right, not for a reward. I can't take that, Sophia whispered. Elias tapped the table. He pointed to the note, read it. Sophia picked up the napkin. This is not a tip. This is your salary. She frowned. My salary? She looked at the check. It was for $250,000. She gasped, covering her mouth. I don't understand. Elias wrote again, his hand moving faster now. I need a voice. I have many meetings, many people to set straight. I need someone who understands that words have power. Someone who knows the old languages and the old ways. I need a director of communications for the Blackwood estate. He looked up at her, his blue eyes fierce and expecting. The job includes full medical benefits for immediate family, including oncology specialists. Sophia froze. How did he know? She hadn't told anyone at the restaurant about her father's cancer. It was a secret she kept to avoid pity. Elias tapped his ear. He had heard everything, every whisper, every phone call she had made on her breaks in the alleyway. He had been watching, listening, judging the silent character of the people around him long before he walked through the door tonight. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. This wasn't just money. This was life. This was her father's survival. Sophia choked out. I don't have a dress code for that. Elias's face cracked into a genuine smile. It transformed him from a terrifying titan back into the grandfatherly figure who just wanted a good meal. He scribbled one last note. Then we will go shopping, first thing in the morning. But first, dessert. He pointed to the menu. Sophia laughed, a sound of pure relief that broke the tension in the room. She wiped her tears. The crème brûlée? She asked. Elias nodded. Coming right up, Mr. Blackwood, she said. Right away. As Sophia walked toward the kitchen, head held high, the diners in the restaurant stood up. One by one they began to clap. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous ovation. They weren't clapping for the billionaire. They were clapping for the waitress who had faced a lion to save a lamb and found out she was the lion tamer all along. 6 months had passed since the night the obsidian room was turned upside down. The seasons had changed, turning Central Park from a lush green to a stark, beautiful white under a blanket of snow. In the penthouse office of the Blackwood Tower, a room that sat 10 floors higher than the restaurant where Sophia used to wipe tables, Sophia Jenkins adjusted the lapel of her navy Chanel blazer. She looked out at the city skyline. It looked different from up here. It didn't look like a beast that wanted to eat her anymore. It looked like a puzzle she had finally solved. "The press conference starts in 5 minutes, Ms. Jenkins," a young assistant said, poking her head through the door. "They're asking about the new philanthropic initiative for the city hospitals." "Tell them I'll be right there," Sophia said, her voice steady and commanding. She no longer sounded like the tired, frightened waitress. She sounded like the director of the Blackwood Foundation. She turned back to her desk, where a framed photo sat. It was a picture of her father, taken just last week. He was sitting in a garden, his hair growing back, a healthy flush on his cheeks. The experimental treatment at Mount Sinai, paid for in full by the Blackwood estate, was working. He wasn't just surviving. He was living. Sophia picked up a tablet and scrolled through the morning briefs. Buried on page 6 of the Financial Times was a small headline: "Former CEO Matteo Vane, sentenced to 5 years for embezzlement and fraud." The article detailed how the hard karma audit initiated by Elias Blackwood had uncovered a decade of Ponzi schemes and stolen pension funds. Vane had lost everything: his penthouse, his yacht, his reputation. The last time Sophia saw him, it wasn't in person, but on the news. He was being shoved into a police van, wearing a cheap orange jumpsuit that fit him far worse than his Brioni suits ever did. He looked old, broken. And Henderson? The manager who feared bad reviews more than he feared God? He was currently working the night shift at a gas station in New Jersey. Sophia knew this because Elias had made a point of stopping there for fuel once, just to buy a pack of gum. Henderson hadn't even recognized them in the back of the limousine. He was too busy arguing with a customer over the price of cigarettes. The door behind Sophia opened, and the rhythmic tap-tap step of a cane echoed on the marble floor. Elias Blackwood walked in. He looked different, too. The ragged charcoal coat was gone, replaced by a tailored cashmere overcoat. His beard was trimmed, and the dirt was gone, but his eyes were the same: piercing, intelligent, and currently full of warmth. He was speaking more now, thanks to the therapy and confidence Sophia had helped him rebuild, though he still preferred to let his actions do the talking. "Ready?" Elias asked, his voice raspy but clear. "Always." Sophia smiled. Elias walked over to the window and stood beside her. He looked at the city he had helped build, and then he looked at the young woman who had saved his soul with a few words of a dying language. "You know," Elias said softly, "people ask me why I hired a waitress to run a billion-dollar foundation." "And what do you tell them?" Sophia asked. "I tell them that anyone can learn finance," Elias said, resting his hand on her shoulder. "Anyone can learn to balance a ledger, but you cannot learn character. You cannot learn the courage it takes to stand between a wolf and a lamb when you have nothing to defend yourself with but a tray." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "For you," he said. Sophia opened it. Inside was a silver necklace. The pendant was small and simple, a tiny key, identical to the rusted iron one he had used to prove his identity. But this one was made of platinum and encrusted with diamonds. "The key to the cellar?" Sophia joked, tears pricking her eyes. "The key to the future," Elias corrected. "I'm an old man, Sophia. I have no children, no heirs. I spent 40 years building a fortress of money to keep people out because I thought everyone was like Vane. I thought they only wanted what I could give them. He looked her in the eyes. You gave me the only thing I couldn't buy. You gave me dignity. He closed her hand around the necklace. When I pass, the foundation, the estate, the tower, it all goes to you. You are the Blackwood heir now. Sophia gasped. The air left her lungs. Elias! I can't. That's billions of dollars. I'm just a linguist. You are the voice, Elias said firmly. And the world needs to hear you. Now come. We have a hospital to fund, and I believe there is a young chef named Pierre who is catering the event. He insisted on making the lamb. Sophia laughed. She put on the necklace. It felt heavy, cold, and real against her skin. She took the arm of the silent billionaire. Together, the waitress and the king walked out of the office, leaving the ghosts of their past behind them, ready to rewrite the story of the city, one act of kindness at a time. And that is how the arrogance of a man like Matteo Vane became the architect of his own destruction, and how a simple act of kindness changed a waitress's life forever. It's a powerful reminder that we never truly know who we are speaking to. The person serving your coffee, the person cleaning the floor, or the silent man in the corner, they all have a story, and sometimes they hold the keys to the kingdom. Sophia didn't save Elias because he was rich. She saved him because it was the right thing to do. In a world full of Matteo Vanes, be a Sophia, because you never know when the beggar you treat with kindness turns out to be the billionaire who can change your destiny. What would you have done if you were in Sophia's shoes? Would you have risked your job to stand up for the silent stranger? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one.